I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all, you know what time it is. It is the best hour of your day. It is 12 p.m. straight up on Wednesday. Tipping points and puzzle pieces brought to you by Resilient Ecosystems. Founder, Executive Director, Mark Boatwright-Frost. How are you today, sir?
I am excellent and wishing everyone to live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper indeed. I like it. Are you watching the new Star Trek show that's out right now?
I am actually, and I am pleasantly surprised by that.
Okay, nice.
I was a big fan of Enterprise, and I was so sad when they canceled it after 4 seasons. I thought it was one of the best shows from Star Trek I'd seen in a long time.
We're going
to be talking a lot about Trek today.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want me to start that off right now?
Yeah, I think we should start it off appropriately in the tone of the great Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner.
All right. Well, here's my shot. Humanity, the final frontier. This is the journey of the Kitsap Resiliency Project. It's a 5-year trek to bring people together, overcoming our cultural divisiveness, to create resilient, informed, and connected communities, to boldly go together where few have gone in thousands of years. All right. I think that sets the tone for us today.
Yep. So I think we can just really be clear here that I'm Team Trek. I'm not really big into the whole dystopian Mad Max thing. I mean, It's fun to watch, but would you really want to live it?
No. And actually, I don't even think that's fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, worrying about the next step and what's going to happen any given time, trying to find resources. Kind of like, going to the market these days, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Well,
or trying to get parts.
Well, and unfortunately, it does appear that it's getting more and more challenging, right?
Pretty much. I was just talking to one of the maintenance guys in my community. Our laundromat has been shut down for a few weeks. First, because of vandalism. Second, because they're working to repair a lot of the machines that were down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, and I talked to him this morning. I said, so I'm kind of thinking about the fact that COVID has shut down 3 major manufacturing and shipping centers in China.
Mm-hmm.
And they're already saying that we're going to be backed up for months and months and months on parts and things that are orders because they're not shipping much out because of the lockdowns. And I'm thinking, it could take a long time to get these machines repaired because there were several out of repair because parts may not be available.
Well, and isn't it true that what's the country that produces all of the chips right now?
Taiwan, Vietnam, China, and a lot are made in Indonesia these days.
And we're still having supply issues with our chips while we're seeing, the issues with our automobile industry and everything else.
Yep.
I mean, nothing is
washing
being
machines
now.
My friend Ronnie waited 4 months to get a part to replace the head on his motorcycle because it was not a new motorcycle. It was from like the early 2000s. And he waited 4 months to get the part so he can get his motorcycle back up and running.
Wow.
And that was not now. That was a year ago. So we're going to see more and more supply chain issues. So let's talk about that for a minute because I don't want to paint a completely dystopian picture now, but we have a choice.
Yes.
And that choice has got to be taken very quickly to prevent us heading to a dystopian future. And as you said last week, it's so appropriately, it's the boiling crab, not the boiling frog. You're sitting in the pot, slowly getting hotter and hotter and hotter until you realize that you're croaking and someone's about to eat you for lunch. So we are in a downward spiral. And I don't, and I say that not tongue in cheek, but I don't think many people will disagree with me. Growing homelessness, growing poverty, food shortages that will continue to grow. An article came out of the UK, The Guardian, last week about a minister, no, head of one of the market chains, and the era of cheap food is at an end unless government steps up and subsidizes. But this is not just the UK. We have the wheat issue with India and the fact that Ukraine was the second largest producer of wheat for export, and they aren't exporting because they're in the middle of a war.
Mhm.
We're heading toward more and more shortages, and we're starting to realize there's a lot of stuff we can't control. And a lot of the problem is the fact that we have an infrastructure that is 40 years old. And I just put up on the Kitsap Resiliency page for those of you who want to see it. John Oliver is a great comedian, but his team researches the subject matter extraordinarily well. And he just did one this week on utilities. And something I didn't know, and I've been studying this for a long time, is that the way utilities are regulated, they can charge up to 10% for investment to get their money back on investments that they make. So they make a lot of really large investments that make no sense with large dollar tickets so they can raise the price to their consumers.
Mm.
And that's how they make a lot of money. So we have projects that don't work, that are never going to work, that basically go through regulatory process, our lightweight regulatory process, and no checks and balances, and billions of dollars are being spent, and that's being passed on to the customers, to the point a pastor in North Carolina or South Carolina, I don't remember which, said that he had a parishioner who was cutting her pills in half so she could pay her power bill.
Yes, I actually watched that episode.
Thoughts?
Makes me feel honestly we're not supposed to be going down the dystopic road, but feels very helpless, right? For these energy companies to have such a not just a monopoly, but to have the power over government, over people, and they just do whatever they want to do. The whole thing of there was a story I believe, and I'm summarizing it, so I might get some of it wrong. You can correct me on the details, but a church was trying to challenge and go and use the solar panels so they wouldn't have to be reliant on there. And they found a way to say no, you can't do that because it's going to cause some kind of harm to them,
Right.
and was able to beat the church back. And it's like, wow, that's incredible. If someone wants to generate their own energy, why would they be punished for that, and not heralded and rewarded? So I mean,
Because it affects the pocketbook.
right. So the reason why I'm not optimistic about it is they have such a foothold. It's almost like some of the threats that you're hearing from Russia. It's like, hey, well, we're not going to give you the gas that you need. And it's like, all right, well, we could shut it off, and you could try to figure it out, but this is our infrastructure and this is our thing. And with all the lobbyists and just the greedy folks out there that are concerned about themselves and their own pocketbook, as you said, I just don't see how it changes.
Well, that I can see how it can change, but it's going to take something unique. It's going to take us learning to work together, to talk to each other, to make choices, to go to the public utilities that are not for profit, and uplift them into setting up a new infrastructure. The reason that it fails so frequently, like Jefferson County set up their own utility, is because they're competing with the 800-pound gorilla in the gorilla's own cage. You just can't do that and come out ahead. So people in Jefferson County are paying more for electricity. And the sidebar here is that we will never have widespread renewable energy as long as this is the case, because they're going to keep pushing centralization because they can put in plants for billions of dollars and reap the benefits and the rewards from that. The chances of the government changing those policies are slim and none because, as you mentioned, the lobbyists, and we have an oligarchy, which means that the corporations and the people with large money influence the government unduly over the needs of the people. And we've seen this again and again. We are heading to a dystopian world because everybody's lining their own pockets on us. Except we don't have endless supply of money. And that's where we're watching the crash start to happen. So we have to go to the public utilities. We have to work with them and start changing the rules of the game.
Mm.
So if we start installing solar panels on all the homes through the public utility district and they charge us for infrastructure and we're generating our own power, that is a game changer. We're going to
So do
start
we do it
legislation.
individually or do we do it as a collective?
We do it as a collective.
Okay.
But first, we have to go sit down with each other and say hi and realize that there are things more important than our politics, our religion, our gender, our skin color, are all of the things that are keeping us apart that we say are bad about other people.
Hmm.
We have to work together and we can make our lives better. I mean, this is something we say all the time. Every show we've talked about the same thing. But we can either go to Mad Max eventually, or we can come together and go to Star Trek, because that was the whole thing about Star Trek. It happened the way it did because people came together.
But if I'm not mistaken, I don't know. Rob's walking behind me. There's the Kelvin timeline, or maybe in all of them, right? I mean, the Earth was going through some turmoil before they got to the point of
They had World War III.
That really, yeah, you know. So
Yep.
Are we going to have to go through World War III before we come toward first contact and then moving toward a Gene Roddenberry society?
Well, they'd already started on the Gene Roddenberry Society before First Contact.
Correct. All the time.
So, hey, Rob.
You're getting worse, and World War III, and then from there you have the other side where humanity tries to work together and develop the science where they can create the conditions for first contact.
Mm-hmm. So he's saying I'm right, not just the Kelvin timeline, but all timelines.
Yeah, pretty much. And the thing is that that's science fiction. We don't have to follow their timeline and have World War III, though we've been close to it how many times? And here we are again, getting close to it again. We can choose to go together, but we have to do it on a person-to-person, neighborhood-to-neighborhood, community-to-community scale until we've created a model where other people are following along. So we're back to the science of tipping points. We can make this happen. We just have to be willing to do it. We have to create the will.
Well, let me ask you, Mark. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but from the information that I consume and just looking at the tea leaves for what that's worth, right? My tea leaves might be rotten. It seems like World War III is imminent on some scale, at least a World War II and a half. Is that what you see? I mean, we think about the conflicts with China and Russia and Ukraine and things that are going on in the Middle East and Israel. I mean, it's everywhere, right?
It is.
Police were in all of it simultaneously, which that's not going to work. We'll be spread too thin. But it seems like it's like this big blister that has to pop, and it's going to be nasty, and there's going to be a huge amount of loss of life, and we're already seeing what's happening. Some countries are pulling back on their exports of food, which is causing issues. I mean,
India is because of the massive drought,
right?
And we are going to be, if the drought continues in California and the Southwest. What is it now? It's now like very few feet above the turbines on Lake Powell, which means Southern California will be without a lot of power. So, yeah.
So so my question, to go back to it, is, do you believe that we are going to, in short order, experience a World War II and a half or a World War III? Maybe all out nuclear war, but some pretty severe.
I can't answer that question, but I hope not. The media that I consume and the conversations I have all over the world tend to lead me to believe that people are really not wanting that. And we're pushing away from it, but we don't have the say at this time to determine it. That's done by industry, the military industrial machine, pushing Congress to sell bombs to make that happen. And that's the thing that scares the most out of me is we make decisions based on the health of a war industry as opposed to the needs of citizenry. There's a saying that, and I can't remember whether it's Clausewitz or not, but there's a saying that war is the next step in a failed diplomacy. So are our diplomats negotiating and communicating in good faith, or are we trying to get the most that we can in the way of profit from other countries without going right up to that edge without going over the edge? And the trouble is, when you're playing Russian roulette and you have a gun with 3 bullets in it, your chances of not getting dead are cut in half. If you play Russian roulette with a fully loaded automatic weapon, you're dead. It's just a matter of how close to the edge and what weapon are you using. And if you step over the edge, millions of people die. This is something that's just a reality. It was a reality in the Cold War. We're in another Cold War phase now. And then you've got the non-state actors, which are the terrorists, which could be doing it too. And the whole key to diffusing this is to come together and take care of people.
Well, to that end, maybe it's not World War II or World War III, but are we headed toward a civil war here in the States?
Well, there's a lot of noise, but the people on the other side of the Civil War are a vast minority. Let's talk about Roe versus Wade for a minute. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but just the numbers. 80% of the people supported Roe, and yet they overturned it for political reasons. 80% of the people in this country felt that Roe represented them, including a lot of the people in the evangelical churches in the South. But they couldn't say that out loud, but they'll say it in the voting booth. The trick is that the mass amount of people want peace. The mass amount of people want security. The mass amount of people want to live well. They want jobs. They don't want welfare. They want to be able to do something meaningful. And they aren't getting it from our government. So if you're going to ask about a civil war, I'd be more worried about a revolution, which I don't think is a good idea.
I mean, but isn't that the same thing with a different name?
Yes and no. Civil war is about one side against the other. A revolution is taking over the government and putting something else in place.
That's the same thing.
But, yeah, sort of, but there are nuances. If you're speaking historically, I don't like revolution. The core word is revolve, and we've done revolution for 15,000 years. We've done over 100,000 revolutions in this world, and every one of them seemed to reset the government right back to where it started with different people in charge. And the same exact abuse of people starts again. I think we need to intentionally evolve. I think we need to talk to each other. We need to embrace our humanity. We need to talk about things that are important to us, about the things that matter, about our ability to survive, our ability to eat, our ability to have security of some sort. And I think that is going to happen on a local level and grow.
Well, let me push back on that. I believe that many of us have been doing that, right? And not just locally, nationwide, more so than ever. We have been coming together to learn from each other and talk about these issues, right? And still we're here. And to your statement earlier, if 80% of people support Roe, then why would this be overturned and why now? Right? I mean, you're saying that you want you don't want revolution, you want this kind of a reform, if you will. But how do you get reform if these same actors are still in place and they're making these decisions that are counter to what 80% of the population wants? Like, I mean, where did that even come right now?
It's a good question, and there is no real answer except that they've gotten to the point of arrogance where they don't care what the people say. And actually, if you look how it happened, Roe was overturned by the Supreme Court, not by the Republican Party in an open vote in Congress. And by over the Supreme Court, that gives them a level of invulnerability. To see, that wasn't us. We promised we would do it and see it got done, but it wasn't us who did it. It was the Supreme Court who did it.
Yeah, but that goes to my point is why the Supreme Court and why now?
Okay, so you have to understand that the right wing And again, this is not condemnation of the right. I've known a lot of Republicans that vote a lot like I do and think a lot like I do, and a lot of Democrats who think like I do, and there are extremes in both parties. But the Republican Party and the very right wing have been pushing a grassroots, local community agenda for decades, and what you're seeing is the result of that. What the people who care about their own lives and care about having a better system aren't building grassroots networks. They don't have that agenda. As a matter of fact, there's lots and lots and lots of articles out there about how the right wing engaged with the evangelical church to push this agenda and build those grassroots support networks, which we see again and again and again. And everyone else is left out of that loop. So there's a vast minority of people having control over the majority of the people, because there's a grassroots network in place that put all of the mechanisms in place to elect the right people, to influence the Supreme Court, to make this occur. And that's the civil war you're seeing, is a grassroots network built on the evangelical Christianity in predominantly the South, but throughout the country, driving an agenda that has led to where we are. If you want to see a dystopian future, let's just follow that agenda, because that will take us right to that place.
But I think it's more than that, and I'll take you on your word, from the evangelical right. But I think there's, folks in the Black community that are fed up with things, and they want to see, revolution or change. There's white nationalism. There's so many. Critical race theory. You can go on and on and on.
Based on fear.
But there's this crescendo of all these separate groups being disenfranchised and speaking their voice against the government all at the same time, right? And so we're not all on the same page, because we all have different things that we're fighting for and advocating for. But
we all hate each other.
But we seem to be at a precipice where this thing is going to blow up, and it's going to be pretty nasty.
So going back to the title of today's show, I guess we all have to make some choices, don't we?
I don't know. I think it's going to end up being, the strongest survives.
One of my best friends is a gentleman named Jay Silverstein. He's a professor of anthropology. And whenever I get stuck with the Darwinistic look of things, I talked to Jay, and I don't have it handy, but I have a treatise of his from last year when he was stuck in the Soviet Union in Siberia, teaching at a college because of COVID, and he couldn't leave. And he wrote this thing about how Darwin is misunderstood with the survival of the fittest. It's much like the Bible. People took the pieces of it that would best suited their philosophy. Mm-hmm. But they didn't take it in total, and they didn't read it in context. And who is stronger? Millions of people working together to make a change, or a few who want to drive their agenda?
Well, I think that's kind of a trick question, right? Because it has shown itself to be true that it is the few that are driving the agenda.
Because there is no opposing network of people working together.
No, and that goes to several shows ago when we were trying to talk about, well, what thing do we tackle first, right? Everyone comes to the table, they bring their puzzle piece, we have the conversation, we rank our needs, and your number 1 is my number 7, and and vice versa. And so now we've got a problem, right?
So but we negotiate that at the table when we're all there sitting and talking. Say, okay, let's see where the priorities are, and we talk about the needs of all of the people and put them on the table, and we figure it out. We facilitate and mediate the discussion to where we can come up with something that everyone agrees on. This is consensus. And it's a process. It's not really, oh, damn it, I want blah, 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 blah. You can't do that. You have to be in good faith and have conversations. Okay, I see that this is important. But it's my number 7, it's your number 1, and my number 1 is your number 7. So let's figure out what's the most important for the group. In this case, in Kitsap County, I can tell you what we get the biggest traction with in the discussion: food for all.
Well, see, that's interesting because I'm in a lot of different circles, and food isn't their top priority. It's not even their top three.
Because you're not having the same discussion that I'm having with people. If you go to talk to those people and say, how do you feel about going to the supermarket? Now, in your circles, are you talking about the racial issues?
Yeah, that could be a circle.
Okay.
And I would say probably for me, the majority of the circles that I'm in is more centered around housing, right? Affordable housing.
Okay, and there's some big questions about that. The article, I got some interesting feedback on the article that came out yesterday in the Kitsap Daily News about the Poulsbo City Council deciding not to go with METF, the tax breaks, the tax manipulation to get affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And the article was said, Poulsbo turns down affordable housing or some such thing, which is immediately meant to inflame the emotions. Thank
Right.
you, our media. Piss off. But if you read the article, it explains how it's really not a beneficial program. So,
wasn't there something in there like up to 30 years in tax breaks?
Yeah, for the developers, but
Yeah,
not for the people, and the people in the county are paying for it. So this is like the net metering argument about power, going back to the whole power argument. Net metering is a shell game. And for those of you who don't know, a shell game is you put a pea under a shell and you swap it around and you bet on which shell the pea is going to be under. And it's never under that shell because the guy palmed it. Net metering is a shell game that is, and I'm going to get creamed for this next statement, but I'm sorry. It's basically designed for rich white people to be able to put solar panels to feel good about themselves. They don't really benefit them because if the power goes out, their house is as dark as their neighbors, but they're the only ones who can financially afford to have it done under the system. And so it's not going to go out to everybody. And we go back to the point is it was in place because the power companies, the giant for-profit utilities, make money on big projects, not on solar panels. So this is the way that they prevent things from happening. My understanding of reading the article is METF was another way to prevent affordable housing from going out very farther, because once taxes start going up on people, they're going to start screaming about it, and it's going to be a halt on any more affordable housing because it costs them money. There has to be a new model. There has to be a different way of looking at it, and the people have to come together to say enough is enough.
I agree with what you're saying. And in regards to that article, Rob and I were discussing that yesterday. It would have been nice to know, yes, it's on taxpayers, but what was it on taxpayers? How much was it? Is it $90 a month for property owners? What were we really looking at? Because I think that's important.
I think all data is important.
Well, I think that's a really big piece of it, right? Because that can scapegoat.
It was interesting it wasn't covered.
Right.
But also remember the headline was said to inflame people, and I was interested to see that people were like being angry, and I'm thinking, well, they read the headline.
But you know what? If you just put a benign headline up there,
people won't read it.
Won't read it. So you're trying to trigger people to engage and actually read it, which we're talking about it, right? Maybe you don't read it if it has a benign title in it. So in that sense, job done. The second step then has to have a complete conversation.
And here's my downside of things. I'm on Facebook enough to think that people just don't read. They jump at the title, and I said, did you actually read the article? Because what you're saying has nothing to do with the article. And then you get into a flame war and you just decide not to be on Facebook for a couple days.
Well, I'll never leave, but the thing, well, you can't chase me away. I don't care about Meta or Facebook. There were studies that show, you send an email and, some huge percentage of folks would just delete it without even opening it. A smaller percentage would actually open it and read the title. And then a very small percentage of folks would actually read it. And I think that's what we're just looking at here in the digital
Yep.
age. And folks will, they do it all the time, right? It's we're going to argue off the title. Someone else half read the article of the title that you only read, so now you believe what they said was in the article, and then those are your facts, right? That was the extent of your research. But it does
It's
give
a great metaphor for the challenge we face.
yeah, but it does give an opportunity for us that are having this conversation here in front of an audience and those that are watching to go deeper into it. And again, that is where the change is going to come, right?
So let me paint a picture of why that's a challenge, and this is because I've been doing this for years now. People don't read and don't look at things because they are so overwhelmed. They're afraid to open up their mind to any other information. Oh my God, it's going to take something from me. And we are in a position where we are all just scratching to get by, and we can't take two steps back. We can't gain perspective. We are terrified that if we get involved with something, it's going to cost us, and we live a life of fear. It's why we fear each other. That's why all of these movements of control go out, because we live a life of fear, and that is by design. Our culture is designed to create a situation of fear. We talked about the World War III or constant conflicts. We're back in a Cold War state. I mean, it's like they never stop amping it up, because if we have a moment to breathe, we might come together and tell them all to go to hell.
Well, wouldn't that be interesting?
So we live a life of desperation and fear. And it's because it's pumped at us 24/7, and we have to learn to take a breath and step back from it. I have been, you talk about being blessed and grateful. I am blessed and grateful that over the last decade, my life and my partners have allowed me to step back from the ongoing driven fear and take a good long look at what's wrong and figure out that if we can get some perspective, we can come together and change things.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to gain the perspective, and that's the challenge, is to get that message to people, to create a way for people to start being able to take that breath and talk to each other. And as I said before, I've talked to thousands of people all over the world. They all can agree on three basic things, and if we can get to that point where we can get people to agree on three basic things, the rest of it will fall into place. Kind of like jigsaw pieces.
Well, I mean, that would be fantastic. I'm definitely more pessimistic in this conversation than you are. I think we're headed to some pretty severe conflicts here nationally and internationally, and
And it's going to
hopefully,
continue to grind to the worst side of things as food prices continue to go up, oil prices continue to go up, people's lives continue to get more and more reduced, and poverty continues to increase, homelessness continues to increase, and people talk and talk and talk, but we're not coming up with solutions. And that's because the money behind it is manipulating the situation. And you notice I'm not saying money is evil or the oligarchs are evil. They're just short-sighted. They don't understand that if we keep going down this path, they're going to collapse with the rest of us. No bunker, no money on Cayman Islands, no Bitcoin, no nothing is going to save us.
but I wouldn't put that on the rich and the wealthy. I'd also put that on the everyday person, right?
Yeah.
And that could be because you're so inundated with just survival that you don't have time to, as you said, gain
I
perspective.
agree with you. We are in complete agreement on that. I have posited in several things, including the handbook I wrote. By the way, the handbook for building community is available on Patreon. Please subscribe and become a member of Patreon. You can download that, and we will help you go through it and help facilitate conversation with your community. And the side note of that is we also have dates coming up on the fourth Thursday of the month, where we're looking for champions to move out to their neighborhood, and we will come and do a barbecue for you. But I've said in the book, I've said several times, that when you think about the very, very wealthy, they are as broken, if not more broken, than the rest of us. The reason that and this is okay, this is opinion and psychology, and several psychological articles I've read. When you are completely engaged in acquiring, you're doing it to fill a void. You're doing it to fill a hole in you because you're unbonded, you're not connected. And that's the same thing we try and do, except we're trying to do it to feed ourselves. For them, it's they feel a loss all of the time that they're trying to fill. So in some ways, they're far more broken than we are, because it's less real to them, and it means it's less grounded. That they're constantly trying to acquire to get more and more because they have a hollowness inside. So when I think of the rich, very rich people, I don't think of them as greedy in a sense. I think of them as broken, if that makes sense.
Sure, I can accept that.
So yeah, and the trouble is that their brokenness is going to collapse everything if we allow it to continue to happen. And the only way to change that, and I get where you're coming from, Marwan. People don't feel empowered to make a change by themselves, and they have no experience in our life and not for thousands of years of what coming together can do unless it's in a violent manner like a revolution. If we actually start talking to each other and take that step back and breathe and start talking to each other, we'll find we have far more in common than we have different.
Sure, but I'm empathetic to someone waking up and wondering where their next meal is going to come from, how they're going to put gas,
Absolutely.
get to work, how they're going to pay their rent. Some corporation just laid off 1,200 people online and told them, "Oh, you don't even need to come in. We're having security pack up your belongings, right?
Netflix yesterday.
Severance package for you,
Yeah.
and then eviction assistance is over." And so now you may lose your job and get evicted all in the same month. So when you're looking at it like that, that's the extreme side of it, right?
That's
But
that's the reality for almost 50% of the people in the United States. That's 50 half of the 300 plus million people live that existence today every day. That's not a hypothetical. That is a reality.
And so as that being the reality, I don't have time to go to a council meeting and have 3 minutes to speak when I really don't feel like you're believing or listening to what I'm saying and really saying, you know what, I'm going to take that under consideration and maybe we'll actually change how we do things because that's not your interest. I'm really not your constituent. So I don't have time for that, right? I mean, we've seen this over time, right? Things that both parties have done for voter suppression, let's say. So it's like, well, if you can't get there, if you don't have the time to take off work, well, then you can't participate in democracy. So whatever those things look like, folks are so busy they don't have time, and it's like, look, man, this isn't going to work, and I need some kind of instantaneous change to my life, and the only way that I'm going to get that ends up manifesting itself in January 6th or riots or, what I'm saying, protesting those.
So do they have time to have somebody feed them?
No.
I mean, if they're struggling for food and they're struggling for rent, what if somebody goes to where you're at and puts food out on the table for you?
Yeah, but there's no infrastructure for that. So that sounds great, but I need to figure that out now. And I still got to figure out how to pay my rent and keep my lights on and
I get that. And the thing is that they won't go to a council meeting to change things, and it's not going to change anyhow. We've already had that discussion and discussed it to death that the government doesn't change things. Government is about creating stability and moving forward and doing the best they can with ever shrinking resources, just like everybody else. So if you're trying to get somebody motivated to change the way of doing things, go to them. And you do that. So yes, there is an infrastructure. G2 does that all the time. You give people rides, you bring food to people, you reach out to people, you're helping them sign up for the rental cafe. You're doing all of this stuff. So you're already doing that. What you need to do in addition to that is help people start talking to each other. And doing that while you're feeding them is probably not a bad thing.
You want me to do more?
I'm just saying maybe we together and bringing other people in can find a way to deliver a message without it being one of we want to control you for giving you food, but we want to empower you to change the situation that creates the need to have us bring you food.
Well, what I'd like to do is kind of put that to the audience also, because again, you are
Absolutely.
you are the puzzle pieces. What is it that we the people need to do to come together to stimulate the participation of creating the change that we want?
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of you being pieces. If you bring your pieces of the puzzle, you will bring things that Marwan and I would never have a million years of thought of, but are vital pieces to the puzzle. You
Yeah.
just don't know it, or you don't feel empowered to bring it. And please let me put my hand on your head, and you are empowered to bring it. Please.
You are healed.
Yeah.
But really, I think people probably need to ask that question for themselves and then provide the answer out. Like,
Yep.
what do you need to be empowered to participate in the change, right? What does that look like for you individually? And based on that, yes, there are many organizations and individuals that are doing great work in so many different arenas, whether it's profit, nonprofit, or just, individual efforts. How can you plug in and build, start to build on that scale, right? So that we can, community gardens, community housing, whatever that looks like,
Right.
carpooling,
And we are getting ready to put together the work group, think tank, I don't know what to call it, to talk about out of the box housing solutions to create affordable and low income housing. So that is something that Resilient Ecosystems is introducing to the Kitsap Resiliency Project. And we are going to be recruiting people in the next week or so to get together in June to start whiteboarding ideas, And so if people have ideas for how to create affordable housing and low income housing and house the homeless, bring it. The issue is a lot of people have ideas out there. And this is why we're putting this group together. We want a diverse group of people because some people come in and say, "Well, tiny homes," and that's the end of the statement for them, and that's okay. But the next question is, what are you willing to do to make those tiny homes a reality? And that's why we have other people in the room that create synergy and other pieces of the puzzle that will say, well, zoning is something we have to address, so we can write this way and get it through the zoning process and start moving forward. Now we have to worry about financing and insurance and all of the other things and collaborative services that go with that. So let's bring Kitsap Mental Health in and talk about that. Let's bring in Habitat for Humanity and talk about that. Let's bring in Kitsap Community Resources and talk about that. Bremerton Housing Authority and talk about that. So we have the ideas, but now we're starting to put together a plan to implement the ideas. So it's not just an idea, it becomes something more. But you have to bring your idea to start that conversation, whatever that idea is. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just, you triggered me with the tiny homes. I'm a snowflake. So,
I'm just saying that because that's the one I've been hearing for 3 or 4 years now. Everybody says, well, we just need to do tiny homes. I said, well, great. How are we going to do them? What are we going to do with that?
I'm very torn on the whole tiny homes things because it's like, all right, when you throw that out there, it's like, well, does your ass want to live in a 400 square foot space, right? Do you want to give up your 2,600 square foot property to live in a tiny home? Either
I lived in a 280 square foot place for a year.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people that throw out tiny homes as just being the solution when they know damn well they wouldn't want to live that way, right? So,
well, absolutely,
hold on.
Yeah,
hold on.
I'm agreeing with you.
Well, that's great. Let me finish my statement. When you have folks that throw it out there and say that's the solution, knowing that they wouldn't live in it themselves, right? To me, it looks like house arrest, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we don't have any more room to jail these people, so we're going to put an ankle monitor and let them be out in the wild with everyone else, right? And I have my thoughts about that. You're going to pay to be on house arrest, but we need you to keep going out and making money and stimulating the economy at the same time, which is.
But we already do that.
Hey there, BK. But then It's like, so if you're in a tiny home and you're willing to live in a 300 or 400 square foot space, seems like maybe those folks should receive some kind of a tax break or a subsidy because they're doing the greater good for the community, right? I mean, they're making a sacrifice for us all by giving up, the luxuries that many of us have. Like, I'm in a 700 and something square foot space, right? Yeah, I was just talking about it yesterday. It's like, man, could I cut down to 400 square feet, or 300 square feet? Would I be able to entertain? Would I feel claustrophobic? Would I be willing to do that? But it's so easy for us to just kind of throw those things out when it just impacts the person that's going to be living there and it doesn't impact you. I just want people to be more cognizant when they're so flippant on the ideas that kind of come flying out of their mouth. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. But I'd kind of like to move to the point that, wow, so much to say on that. I agree with you. I agree with you. But the fact is, it's kind of like people looking at the headline.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me, and I'm sorry if I'm going to alienate anybody here. Understand, I don't mean to. But I've had people come up to me over the last decade doing this work and say, have you talked to Congressman X? Have you talked to Representative Y? Have you talked to Senator Z? And I said, at first I went, oh, well, let me go talk to them and everything else. And then I learned a lesson about what it is. And I did some analysis about how it all works. And now I just simply say, and what do you think that would get me? What do you think? How do you think that would benefit the project? And they go, they're liberal. They will like what you do. I said, well, okay, so the project is neither liberal nor conservative. It's human. And them liking me makes me feel like if I had $1.50, I could buy a cup of coffee. It's meaningless. So when people say tiny homes, and I don't mean to knock the people that support tiny homes, and maybe there's a solution there. I personally don't know. I tend to feel, along with Marwan, that it could be another prison system, but to me, that's more along the lines of how you think about it going in and how you develop the community going in. And that's kind of what the real Kitsap Resiliency Project is about, is developing different ideas of community and how people communicate with each other and how people think about each other. And I know that there's a huge tiny home movement. If you go on YouTube, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of videos about people who have moved into tiny homes willingly and who like the experience. And there's several videos about and thought it was the worst thing that ever happened in their lives. And this is just the reality, and this is part of the discussion, to explore those ideas and find the ones that best suit the need of your area by going through the process of asking questions and finding answers.
Yeah, and like you said, to your point, there are people that, hey, that I'm a minimalist and that's enough space for me. It's great. I just think we need to reward through incentives, the progress that we want to see, right? We reward and we invest in all the things that are counter to humanity, as you call it. Yep. I think that's one of the big changes that we could actually make. When you were talking about Star Trek versus what was the movie? Mad Max. I think Judge Dredd is what we're going to see in the interim before, right?
The first one or the second one? No. Joking.
I actually like them both, but that is 60 foot, or 60 floor units where you've got folks living in these areas, and that's what it looks like because, well, we're going to need all the farmland and everything else, and so the only thing we really can do is build up. That's what I think is going to happen instead of really the tiny homes. We'll see it.
Which isn't a bad solution either, but when you build up, you have to think about building human. Judge Dredd in the mega cities, those are not human.
No, but that's kind of what I feel could be coming.
A couple things I want to say here. First of all, the one thing about Mad Max I want is his car in the very first one. But that aside, the old musclehead in me, the muscle car person in me. But I did, as I said, a decade with the Clean Technology Trade Alliance, and I got to learn a lot about different technologies all over the world. And Sweden came up with a really interesting technology that I was thinking would make buildings far more human. They impregnated, they had what they call SIPs, structural panels made of concrete with metal embracing, but they ran fiber optics through them. So when you have that concrete insulated panel, structurally insulated panel. When you put that into a building, a tall skyscraper, the outside light transfers through the fiber optics, and the inside of the concrete glows with natural light. And I thought, okay, if you're going to live in a concrete building, having natural light glowing naturally through the structure just seems so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It gives that more human light, more human feel to it. So if you're starting building tall structures, I think we need to think about things like that. We need to think about how to create an environment that is warm and supportive of humanity. Also, very efficient. When you have that kind of lighting, you reduce your electric bill because you have natural lighting in the house.
I would be interested to know if there are any architectural firms or other agencies that are looking at building, I don't know what you would call them, miniature skyscraper cities that have. Oh,
Actually, I can name one in Seattle.
really?
Yeah, Methuen.
Will you type that in the chat?
Yeah.
I want people to kind of check that out.
Yeah, Burt Gregory of Methuen has been following that for a long time. And I've had several conversations with him. And he has been looking for ways to develop human-based housing for 20, 30 years. He built a project of straw bale houses up in the islands, San Juan Islands. He has been stretching and looking for different ways of doing things. He's built underground houses, done a lot of work. There are a lot of great architects around to do it. A lot of people who are, there's always the smoke and mirrors of the greenwashing, but Burt Gregory is probably the outer edge of the experimentation. In our own town, Rice Fergus Miller, their building downtown, has a lot of a tremendous amount of sustainable technologies built into the building, including a cistern on top of the roof. And if you want to see what some of this can do, go up to Islandwood on Bainbridge Island. By the way, Islandwood chef is a famous chef Chris Now, who has come in third in the world cooking competitions. And he does amazing things with farm to table up at Islandwood. But Islandwood is a sustainable campus where they teach children and house children. They have a living machine, which is takes the human waste from the dormitories and processes them using plants instead of chemicals. And they have a greenhouse that has it done on miniature. You can go and watch the entire process as it goes through. They have tours. It's an amazing place. So there are a lot of resources local.
I'd be really interested in checking that out. We have these buzzwords and, this is the flavor of the day, and it is tiny homes. And we do need to address things immediately, but we also have to think for the long term also, right? I mean,
absolutely
continue to grow, and building up does seem to make sense. And so what are some benefits that can be gained by that? Obviously, we get more people. Can you build gardening in there? Like you said, the cistern on the roof.
They've been doing that in Singapore for years.
Yeah. So I think we need to, the regular folks, when I say right, need to educate ourselves on what is out there. So we're not just being fed whatever the thing is that, hey, we're pushing tiny homes. That's the thing right now, when there could be another option, right? Are the tiny homes being built with enough space to do a garden for a family on that
exactly property? I think that you're going to start seeing the intentional communities become more of the norm as opposed to the little closet pieces on the side, because people want a community. B, they want to share the labor with other people, because shared labor is labored half. You and I might be overcome by the idea of doing a garden. But if we are with people that love gardening,
Yeah.
then we share the skills. That's
Yeah.
the whole beauty about bringing a neighborhood together.
Well, and to that end, like I don't see like tiny homes from the projects that I've seen, having being built with solar panels, let's say, right? Uh, where it's going to feed into itself. It shouldn't take a lot to sustain, a square footage that small. So, I wonder if there's some other green organizations out there that are thinking about tiny homes.
Absolutely.
What is it? A net zero? Is that the terminology?
Yep.
Where
There is thinking, but again, you're running up against utilities that are going to prevent it. There's a lot of discussion going on, especially in Canada. I was watching discussions about how to do net zero tiny homes 7 or 8 years ago at Globe in Vancouver, where they actually had built several of them and they were open for show. They were made manufactured homes. They were put together with the SIPs
Mhm.
and installed with solar panels, light, and they were experimenting with this years ago. And the thing is that we have to overcome the developer hold on the government, the which means we have to find financing for the funding for the government, local governments, that isn't solely developer influenced.
Well,
And
what I'd like to do is, next week, unfortunately, is our
fortunately, we have a pancake breakfast.
it's great, but we won't be able to have this discussion next week. But what I'd like to do, Mark, if you're up for it, is maybe bring some of these resources to the a very soon future podcast where we show the efforts from Methuen and some of the other places, and
Sure.
just show folks what is already out there existing to get their juices flowing on it, right? Because what you've been giving me an education on what already exists and what possibly could be done, right? I'm not thinking about, hey, you know what? You're not for tiny homes, but what if you built them with solar panels? What if you built them with their own garden, so they're creating their own
So
food, right?
we spend millions and millions, and I mean, I think Brownsville was the most recent one, wastewater treatment plant that we spent $60 million to upgrade and bring it in, increase its capacity just slightly so it would meet the minimums. But there's a technology that's been out there for 40 years to put a house-sized wastewater treatment plant into a neighborhood, and it will process up to 2,000 homes waste and can bring the water back up to potable level. They can find methamphetamines in the water and tell you where in what region they're coming in. They're amazing technologies, and they can be run on solar.
Really?
Yeah, I've known this for a while, but trying to get the governments to adjust it. I met with the former Bremerton public works director with the CEO of the company out of South Carolina that builds these, and he insulted us.
Mm.
The previous mayor, Pennyland, asked him to have the meeting, and he passive aggressively insulted both of us for even bothering to fly out. And the owner of the company flew out on his own dime.
Wow.
That did enormous damage to my relationship with the man that I was working with on several projects, because this bureaucrat felt like he was being pressured to get out of his zone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to give you a picture, I interviewed this guy for the mayor, along with several other possible public works directors before he was hired. And I asked him a question: "Is what is your thoughts on sustainability?" And he says, "What's sustainability?"
Okay.
I said no, and not that my decision was the final decision, but my opinion was absolutely not. And they hired somebody else who made it 2 weeks before she quit, and they ended up hiring this guy.
Oh, wow.
So when you hear those types of things, it's hard not to think that the system itself and the structure itself is broken to the degree that you cannot get and sustain good people who might be able to make it better for everybody.
Well, and I think to our end, not yours, because it's a our thing, right? Is the coming together of people to share ideas and knowledge as we educate ourselves. like you just done here with Methune and other things that can be done, then as we the people actually start having people run that are really supportive of our interests, then we can go ahead and enact these policies and changes and try some other things. And
Absolutely.
that's my glass half full, and what makes me smile and gets me up every day is because that opportunity is there. um, it is not hyperbole when we say that it is your best hour of your week. You know, the hour goes so fast, so quick. I hope one thing that you take from this conversation today, Mark and I don't agree on everything. We're divergent on a lot of things, but we have a lot of respect for each other. We learn from each other. We're willing to have the conversation, and we're not going to pull away from the table. And that's really what needs to happen if we want the change to actually manifest itself. So, I
Did you just say we're modeling the behavior? I just want to be clear.
right, go figure, right? You know,
Yeah.
but I really hope people can take that, and I encourage you, get outside of your bubble. When Mark says, we were talking about earlier about different communities, and clearly I'm black, so it's like, okay, so are you talking about the black community? It's like, no, I'm actually talking about homelessness, but I need to get out of the black community. I need to get out of the homeless community or other communities that I frequent in my life, and try and engage in some other communities and build that other community and relationship, right? Expand that a little bit, get those other ideas. So I'm grateful for you for that, Mark. I do want to tell everyone next week is the pancake breakfast. That's going to be Wednesday at 11, May 25th. New Horizon Ministries, 4040 Wheaton Way. That's Suite 203. I can tell you, KCR will be there, Bremerton Housing Authority, which is awesome. They're always there. But we're also going to have the Executive Director, Adam Smith, from Youth for Christ. We also may have a drug counselor from Drug Court come in and stop in from West Sound Treatment if he gets out of court on time. And so it is growing and growing and growing. So please come on down and spend some time with us next week and eat some good food. Last word,
Okay,
Mark.
and I do want to say that on June 1st, the next Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces, we are going to be talking about the Kitsap Resiliency Project. So anybody who has questions about it and who owns it and how's it work and all those things, that's your day. Be here for that. As Marwan and I realized, we had not talked about it at all. So it's time. And then the one after that, I will be happy to share the things that I've learned about local resources and projects that are going on, and some of my ideas about where we can go. But my ideas, again, Marwan says he has to get out of his communities to see a bigger picture. I have to get out of my communities to see a bigger picture. And the best way for both of us to do that is if you bring your pictures to the table so we can see more.
That's right. And we're going to come find you too. So,
Yeah.
all right, everyone. For Mark Boatwright-Frost, I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We'll see you at 3 p.m.